Hello, my name is Adam Henschke, and I'm going to talk to you today about the University of Twente contribution to the Connect project, specifically the work that we've been looking at to do with ethics, trust, and CCAM. So, as an overview, what I'm going to be talking about is I'll start with giving you a little bit of context to basic ideas of philosophy and ethics. Then I'll be looking at the way in which myself and other people from the University of Twente have approached some of the conceptual challenges around trust and CCAM. Then I'll be looking at identification challenges around trust and complexity in CCAM, particularly issues to do with conceptualizing trust and trustworthiness, clarifying stakeholders and users. We'll be looking at an analysis of ethical dimensions of trust management systems. Then I'll be looking towards the future and some of the next steps that we'll be doing on the Connect project, specifically looking to develop and test what we're calling a trust. So, the context. Myself and some other staff at the University of Twente, we work in the areas of philosophy and ethics and technology. And these have, as you'll see, applications to issues of CCAM, trust, cyber physical systems, and so on. But to give a little bit of an idea and an awareness of the sorts of things that we do in philosophy and ethics to help set up how it's relevant to CCAM. The two very, very basic questions that we seek to ask and hopefully give some answers to are, what are we talking about and why does it matter? So philosophy, at least certain aspects of philosophy that we draw from, seek to give clarity to the concepts that we are using. We're also interested in ethics, so giving reasons for why this or that concept matters. So give clarity to the concepts, say why it matters. And it might also include giving reasons why this or that feature matters, or in fact, giving reasons why this or that behavior matters. So again, what are we talking about? Why does it matter? Being clear with what we're talking about, and then giving some set of reasons, whether it's why this concept matters, why this feature matters, or why this behavior matters. So ethics, to give a little bit more clarity here, ethics says something about the way that we want the world to be, specifically giving reasons why we want it to be this way. To give a little bit of explanation of this, consider that we say there are 500 crashes every week. This describes the world, and this is something that you're just simply using to say something about the way that the world is. In contrast, what ethics is concerned with is to say something like why we should have less car crashes. This says something about the way that we want the world to be, because we should avoid suffering and death. So ethics here is saying something about the way that we want the world to be, and the discipline of ethics is then concerned with giving reasons why we want the world to be a certain way. We should have less crashes because we should avoid suffering and death. And so our approach in Connect seeks to combine particular values or general principles, expert views to develop a guide for what makes Connect and connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and wider IoT/cyber systems worthy of trust. So that's the big context of what we're doing. To show how some of those conceptual challenges arise in relation to trust and CCAM, what we did with the University of Twente contribution, we had a look at the existing literature on trust. So this then played out in a few different ways. We looked at the way trust is conceptualized in philosophical literature. We looked at discussions around trust in cyber physical systems, including but not limited to autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles. We also looked a lot at trust in relation to artificial intelligence. To be clear, the Connect project, although it uses some aspects of AI, I wouldn't consider this an overly AI-focused project. But there's a whole lot of things in and around the discussions of trust and artificial intelligence that are really useful and applicable to the sorts of work we do. We then also looked at trust at CCAM. And then one of the challenges that we faced was to balance conceptual clarity that comes from a single definition of trust with a description of trust that is relevant for all parts of Connect and can be used for CCAM more generally. A general challenge that you face in doing definitional work and conceptual clarification is you might make a definition really, really specific and really, really tightly constrained, but then it might use a bit of its utility. However, if you have it wider and a bit of a looser definition, then it might lose some of that clarity. So one of the things that, one of the challenges we face is trying to balance the need for conceptual clarity with practical utility. And as a result of this research, we produced some generalized definitions of trustworthiness, and spoke about the importance of their differences. We also, as I'll talk about in a little bit, we spoke about an identification of different users and Connect's role in developing trustworthy CCAM. And then this gives a foundation for the trust methodology or trust. So, conceptual challenges of trust in CCAM. In terms of clarifying trust, what we did here is we drew from philosophical definitions of trust, particularly looking at informational and logically mediated relations. So here is a general philosophical definition that we produced as part of the Connect project. Trust between A and B. A relies on B to exhibit behavior X in context C to a degree D with warrant W. What we mean by this is, first of all, if we're looking at a really simple description of a trust relationship, A trusts B. So there's a trust relationship between A and B. A expects something of B. So here, trust is a basic expectation that the trustor, A, has of trustee, B. But we need to be a bit more specific. So we also want to say that it's not just A trusts B, but A trusts B to X. So trust needs to be specified for some specific goal or outcome, here given as X. So now the trust relation between A and B, A relies on B to exhibit behavior, here given as RX. A's trust expectations for B is not only what the outcome of B's actions of their performance is, but also on how this outcome was achieved. So here we've got expectations, we've got the performance, we've got the process, and why this goal or outcome was chosen, purpose. So this is what, when we say A relies on B to exhibit behavior Rx, that includes these expectations about performance, process, and purpose. Then, to give a bit more specificity and clarity, A relies on B to exhibit behavior X in context C. The context of trust is really important. Then we also want to include some level of granularity. A relies on B to exhibit behavior Rx in context C to a degree D. Trust comes in degrees. You can trust someone, something more or less. And so we want to capture that with B. Then the final thing here, and a really important aspect of this, is the warrant. So A relies on B to exhibit behavior X in context C to a degree D with a warrant W. What evidence or reasons does A have to trust B? So if we want to give a proper description of trust, we have to include not just the relationship between A and B, not just the expectations that A has of B, not just the behavior or the outcome. We'll also look at the context, the degree, and the reasons why A would actually trust B. What reasons or evidence, or as we put here, what warrant does A have to trust B? So this is a philosophical exercise in clarifying the definition of trust and the ways in which we're using it, but also giving reasons and trying to substantiate some of those elements. We also want to point out that trust depends on the expectations or the attitude that A has towards B. However, trustworthiness is a property of B. And what we want to say here is that trustworthiness is a measure of the trustee's ability and willingness to exhibit some behavior that might be relied upon by the trustor. So trust. Does A trust B? Contrast this with the notion of trustworthiness. Is B actually worthy of A's trust? So we might say that A does trust B. If it turns out B is not worthy of that trust, then there's a big problem. And so what we then looked to do was to develop or adapt the account of trust that we gave, as I covered on the previous slide, for trustworthiness. So an entity B is trustworthy for an entity A if B is worthy of trust for A. If A can rely on B, A's expectations of B are warranted. So here, B is trustworthy for A if A can rely on B or B can meet A's expectations. So here, the trustworthiness of B to A can rely on B to exhibit behavior, RC in context C. There is some warrant for A to expect that B will exhibit RX in C. So how does this relate to CCAM? There are criteria that CCAM must meet in order to be worthy of trust. Can vehicle B navigate an intersection safely, for instance? So here is vehicle B worthy of the trust of other vehicles in that intersection with regard to moving safely through that intersection. Again, the point to draw out here is this is about trustworthiness. Is vehicle B worthy of the trust of the other vehicles in that intersection? Similarly, can vehicle B engage in adaptive cruise control safely? Is vehicle B worthy of the trust of other vehicles on the road with regard to moving and maintaining safe travelling distances? Can vehicle B produce or communicate information accurately? Here, is the information produced and or communicated by vehicle B accurate, free from external interference, and so on? So what we want to see, or what we want to point out, is that trust is seen as the assessment of vehicle A to vehicle B and so on, whereas trustworthiness is concerned with, is B safe? Is B information secure? And so on. Is B worthy of A's trust in relation to security, safety, etc.? Now, as we kind of worked more and more on these conceptual and practical elements, we noticed a range of complexities in and around trust. Unsurprising for those who work either on CCAM, cyber physical systems, or trust as well. There are conceptual complexities. What we've been looking at is largely a deliberately narrow reliance account of trust built on information collection, analysis, and communication between components and vehicles. However, trustworthiness are more than mere reliance. Also, trust and trustworthiness are more than something merely informational. We'd also want to consider trust beyond machines. So here in some of the philosophical, and psychological and sociological literature, people suggest that trust can also be considered as goodwill. Humans trust other humans when those other humans have their goodwill at heart. So what we wanted to do here, and what we need to do as part of this project, is to identify where this wider or human view of trust fits in with Connect and CCAM more generally. And then a final set of complexities arise with the question of who exactly are the products of Connect for? So looking specifically at our project, who are we actually producing products for? So here we entered into a discussion with everyone across the project about an identification of the users. We need clarity on who the users of Connect's products, such as the trust assessment framework, actually are. So a simple view would be A trusts B to X. Ultimately, CCAM are about road users, such as drivers or passengers, people in other vehicles, and cyclists, and so on. And so so the road user A trusts road user B to navigate the intersection safely. But when we think about it, a lot of road users don't care about something like a trust assessment framework. It might be important for them, especially if they don't actually know it's there. As long as it works, that's the kind of thing that they want. So a more realistic view, when we're considering the identification of users, is that A trusts B to X, given warrant, and here the warrant is produced by something like the trust assessment framework. So trustors are other vehicle components or components of other vehicles that are relying upon the TAF. And the users here we consider would be OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, who are concerned with things like the TAF. And perhaps, this is something that we might be looking at later on, perhaps those involved in oversight bodies were tasked with either the technical assurance or the investigations looking at so these are what we consider to be the main users for what we are producing in relation to Connect. It will be OEMs and perhaps oversight bodies. And so ultimately, the users of Connect and TAF are OEMs, special role holders in oversight bodies. Now, with that said, we also, like part of the interest here in the reason for University of Twente's involvement on this project is to consider a range of ethical issues around trust. So we've got a relatively narrow, somewhat technical specification of trust, but we also want to include a widened set of considerations around trust. And so our interest here expands beyond the reliance or component aspects of trust. So this is leading into current and future work. We've been looking quite closely at the EU high-level ethics group, the HLEG, and the assessment list for trustworthy artificial intelligence, ALTI, which is produced by Fernandez, Lorca, and Gomez. And in their work, they conducted an analysis of 350 plus stakeholders looking at trust and artificial intelligence. We saw here there was no need for us to reinvent the wheel. What we are now involved in the process of is adapting that, both the work of the high-level expert group and the assessment list for Connect into CCAM. This high-level expert group identified 7 key areas that they see are necessary for artificial intelligence: human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. And again, what we're looking at now and what we're involved in now are to see which of these are relevant to which parts of Connect and in what way. So how have we done this? What we're trying to do now is to connect wide trust considerations for Connect. So we might pick up some of these 7 key areas that track directly to the work that Connect is doing. For instance, something like technical robustness and safety. This fits somewhat neatly to the TAF. Others, however, the connections seem less obvious. Something like diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. If we're looking at something that's doing with, say, components and intersection management or something like that, it seems strange to talk about diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. However, there are ways that something like the key area 5 can apply to CCAM. For instance, how should a CCAM intersection respond to a vehicle that would not share the information necessary for a trust assessment? Is it fair to deny them access to this intersection, to slow their passage through the intersection, or for them to get equal treatment considering they are not sharing their information? This then draws out complexities in plural values. How should the need for something like information sharing, such as key area 4, be balanced against the need for privacy, key area 3? How should the need for information sharing necessary for safety, key area 2, be balanced against privacy and accountability, and so on? This is not an uncommon problem in ethics about different values and how you both protect and balance those values against each other. But given that we're drawing from these 7 key areas, one of the things that we're looking at and working towards is ways to identify and perhaps some suggestions on how to engage with, recognize, and respond to the complexities in plural values. So the next steps, what we're looking at here, are ways that we're working towards what we're calling trust methodology. So we're currently adapting this high-level expert group assessment list for trustworthy AI, adapting this for Connect and CCAM more generally. So we're producing a detailed set of questions that identify how the 7 key areas manifest in Connect and CCAM. We're going to produce an externally reviewable assessment for the trustworthiness of Connect and CCAM. This will be developed in such a way as to start from narrow focused ability to connect, such as Connect, trustworthiness, and TEF, and the TAF, and we're going to expand this out to CCAM and connected vehicles. Final point here is on the trust methodology. We're looking at developing 4 key general areas or general steps for this trust methodology. 1, to identify broad trustworthiness requirements. Step 2, mapping trust relationships. Step 3, setting trustworthy standards. And step 4, ensuring and validating the assessment of the set of trustworthy standards. We've completed step 1. This is, the work that I was saying before around the literature analysis, and particularly looking at what the high-level expert group has done. We're in the process of developing step 3, where we're engaged in adaptation of the high-level expert group assessment list for trustworthy AI. We're giving detail to setting trustworthy standards. Still to do what we're looking at for the future are to engage in the development of a full set of questions for this trust methodology. So filling out the details of the 4 key general steps of the trust toolkit, and to complete step 3 of the assessment list for trustworthy vehicles, detail how the generalized definition of trust can be used to map trust relationships. That's step 2. And then engaging with other parts of Connect to specify the steps for ensuring and validating standards. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that this has been useful.